Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Sorry I haven't been uploading in a while, but I've been away and the support is still there from all of you guys, so I just really want to thank you guys for doing that. It really motivates me to keep coming back and just making different, interesting and hopefully helpful graffiti related videos. If you've been waiting on your hit up because you've subscribed and commented on some previous videos, that's coming. I've got some more markers in, so the reviews are going to be back. But other than that, let's get into this video and cut to the edit. So I thought I'd make a video breaking down all the markers used for tagging. So let me clarify. These are markers that you would use to get up in the streets. So black book and sketching markers like Copics, they're out of the picture. Basically think if you went on your go-to online graph store, you clicked on the marker section, these are the categories that you can start to break things down into. Now, why make this video? Well, basically when I first started, the various array of markers advertised online and in stores and just in general was hella confusing. So it would have been cool to see a video at least breaking them down into some general categories about why someone might use them and what their advantages and disadvantages might be. Now, disclaimer before some 40-year-old hops in the comments section thinking I'm telling people what to go out and use, this is just some background info. Like my other videos, you shouldn't take it as 100% your truth. Listen to what I have to say, but at the end of the day, the best thing for you to do is to get your hands on all these markers at some point and come to your own personal preference. So with that out the way, let's get into the video. So in my book, I've broken it down into 4 general categories: markers, mops, steel tips, and paint sticks. Now before we get into anything, let me clarify. If your homie says to you, yo, you got a marker, and you pull out a steel tip, he's not going to be like, you fucking toy, that's not a marker. By definition, metalheads, paint sticks, and even mops can fall under the category of being a marker as they leave a mark on things. But when you want to be more specific, like for the purpose of this video, that's when you can start breaking them down and categorizing them like I'm doing. And it's good to break them down further like that because they all have their own individual uses, their own individual advantages, and of course disadvantages. So sit back and listen to the explanation of each, have a look at some nice tags done by each of them, and then you can come to your own decision about what you like to use. So the first one is the marker. In terms of tagging, probably the most well-recognized implement is obviously the marker. Now this is the marker in the more traditional sense, anything from this thing to this thing. Now markers can generally be categorized 2 ways, either gravity feed or pump action. So gravity feed is similar to most office supply markers. Basically, a nib that extends into the body of the marker, where a big spongy thing holds a bunch of ink and feeds the nib via the magic of gravity. A pump action marker holds the ink or the paint in the body of the marker in liquid form and then feeds it to the nib via a valve system. So the valve regulates the flow of the ink to the nib, so when the nib gets dry, you can simply press it against something to activate the valve and the ink will come through. So this is called juicing your marker and hence requires pumping, so pump action, you get the point. So while some older writers still prefer gravity feed markers, things like your classic pilots, ultra wides, nowadays pump actions are more widely used just because the flow of the ink to the nib is generally better, meaning, cleaner, juicier looking tags. Another aspect that characterizes markers is the nib. In most cases, the nib is rectangular or chiseled, meaning tags have a certain sharpness about them, with people turning to markers for that kind of clean, crisp, and angular look similar to calligraphy. And this look can extend anywhere from a tiny chisel tip to a massive 60mm Molotow masterpiece. Of course, there are exceptions. The most obvious is the bullet tip, which is a widely used marker that gives the tag rounded edges due to the nib coming to a point similar to obviously a bullet. But in general, bullet tip nibs don't get too big, probably 8mm is the largest for those markers. But speaking of the bullet tip and that rounded aesthetic, we move on to number 2, which is the mop. So a mop is different to a marker. They kind of have this, age-old battle of which is better, but it's kind of a preference thing. A mop kind of has the same makeup as a marker, but the key difference is that the flow of ink or paint is usually a lot more, creating tags that can drip. So this is caused by 2 things. Firstly, the valve of a mop is a lot simpler than a marker. It's kind of a spirally looking thing, but for the most part it allows the ink to flow through a lot easier and is just there to ensure that when the nib is not active, ink or paint still isn't flowing through. And secondly, the body of a mop, as in the bit you can hold, is usually a soft plastic that is squeezable, meaning the user can saturate the nib depending on how hard they squeeze. Another key difference is mop nibs are exclusively circular or rounded, which leads to a different aesthetic than markers. For the most part, mop nibs or tips are generally less durable than markers as well, so mops are usually used on smoother and cleaner surfaces. For the most part, the nibs of a marker can take a bit more abuse than a mop, but it's difficult to replicate the same drippy and messy effects that mops have with a marker. Again, it depends on your personal preference and how you want your tags to look. The next one is steel tips. Basically, a steel tip is a marker with a metallic tip or nib. This tip operates much like a simple ballpoint pen, a kind of small metal ball bearing that rolls around and distributes paint or ink when pushed down. Now, this make a marker stem from industrial use, marking things up in the factory and stuff like that, and it's been adapted for graffiti as the metal tip is quite versatile on a number of rougher surfaces. Of course, there's the simple whiteout pens, which I guess count as metal tips, but nowadays graffiti companies are coming up with their own metal tipped markers like the Grog Metalhead and stuff like that, and marketing them as more sturdy and more durable markers to use. And last up, we have the paint stick. So for some writers, the paint stick is a personal favorite because in some cases it feels a lot smoother to tag with than a conventional mop or marker. That's because you're tagging with what is essentially solidified paint. So think of a really buttery crayon. Because the paint is so soft, you hardly catch on the surface that you're writing on, and so the writing process feels really smooth and really fast. When the solidified paint is contained within the marker, it's soft and breakable, and then when it's applied to the surface, it's allowed to dry and harden and makes the tag, somewhat hard to buff. I would categorize the paint stick probably in 2 groups. Number 1 is the solids, which is brands like Sakura and Sharpie Mean Streak. They usually have the twist action and the paint is extremely soft. And number 2 is the scrawlers, which are brands like Markles, Genobo, AP Hobo markers. They tend to be a tiny bit harder than the solids, and they come with this outer casing of dried paint, which you peel off as you go. Maybe there's no difference between the 2 in terms of the makeup of the paint, but generally, scrawlers are a lot cheaper and so usually are subject to more abuse. Again, these markers were adapted from industrial use and are a go-to for most writers as you can tag on just about anything with them. Rough, smooth, wet, dusty, greasy, in most cases the paint will apply to the surface and the tag will look clean. But usually because they are so soft, you kind of have to consider how much of the marker you want to use up if you want to get a tag on a really rough surface. So as I said, those were probably the 4 main categories, and no doubt there are some weird ones out there that I've missed, but for the most part these 4 categories should have you covered. But just as a bonus to share this one with you, which I've come across, I thought it was pretty interesting, and this is the dabber. Dabber. Now you might be saying, what the fuck is a dabber? And this one is a bit of an old school method, so bear with me because I might not know the full details, but it's essentially a bit of wool on the end of a metal rod that you can dip in ink and use as an applicator. So the dabber is usually part of the cap, so for the most part you're carrying around a bottle of ink. I believe, but don't quote me on this, it started as something used for gluing and crafts, and obviously graffiti implements back in the day were all kind of DIY, so someone saw the opportunity in this and thought, hey, it'd be good for tagging. I think it probably takes a certain skill to use, but you can get anywhere from clean tags to messy ones depending on how hard you dab. Nowadays, I think Witch's Brew Ink is the only company that has adapted this as a fully blown graffiti product, but there may be others out there. Something a bit weird to keep in mind. As I like to say, guys, this is my experience, my knowledge, my observation, blah blah blah, and not something to take as fact. So listen to what I have to say, but again, at the end of the day, have fun trying them all out for yourself. Seeing what suits your style and how you like to go out and bomb and tag. That's going to be the most beneficial to you guys. So thanks for watching the video. Hope it was helpful in some way. And let me know if you would have categorized them differently, or there's other marker options that I could have included. But thanks for watching. This is the graph. Oh, one last thing before I go, guys. If you guys want to see a part 2 of me kind of explaining and going through all these markers in person without all the edits, I'd be more than happy to do that. So leave a comment in the comment section below. If you're interested in something like that, or just in general if you're interested in some other type of explanation video that hopefully I can provide some knowledge about. But until next time, this has been the Graph Lounge. I'll be coming at you with more content like this. Hopefully you enjoy it, and if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe, leave a like on this video, and of course a comment. And until next time, I'll see you later, and peace out.